What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Aloha, y'all. Daniel Aaron here. I am your host, and this is the Vibrant Living Show. The Art of Vibrant Living show is all about empowering you to live your most vibrant, thriving life. So here's an encouragement. Actually, make it stronger. I implore you, take something from today's show. We've got an amazing guest who's going to deliver some phenomenal wisdom to you, and the true sense of wisdom, stuff that you can use to make your life better. And use is the key word there. Actually do use it, not just entertainment. Entertainment's fun and cool. The rubber meets the road when you apply something. So take some of the gold that Julie brings to you today. Right? And so about Julie, she is a phenomenal, we could say, body worker, pain expert, physiotherapist, expert practitioner in the myofascial release technique. And she is an author. She is in process of creating her next book. She's also a coach, and she's got an incredible passion for helping people to overcome pain and to live better lives. Julie, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. I'm so happy you're here. And I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. I've got 8,000 questions for you, though given that our audience may not know who you are as well as I do yet, would you give us a little bit of background of how did you get into doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm Julie, and I live in Northern Ireland. I qualified as a physiotherapist in 1990, so I've been working as a physio for 35 years. And then I was struggling with my own health issues. I developed viral meningitis when I was up the foothills of the Himalayas many years ago. And as a result of that, it developed into like chronic fatigue. And then I was eventually diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I thought as a physio, I was going to have to give up my work because my work was quite physical. But I loved my work, and I was determined to try to prolong my work life. So I had heard about myofascial release, and I had heard that it was quite gentle for the therapist to deliver. So I thought I would do some training in it, and it might prolong my work life. So I'm a great believer in going to the source, the original sort of a godfather of myofascial release. And I found John F. Barnes in America. I went out there to do some of the initial training. And when I was traveling so far from Ireland, I decided to do 3 courses back to back. And when I did the 3 courses, when I came home, I had no symptoms. So it totally changed my life. And then I caught the bug. I wanted to do a lot of his training. So I've been back out to America probably twice a year for about 5 years after that, just to complete training with him. And that's sort of about 90% of what I do day to day at the moment is hands-on treatment with my clients. And it's been life-changing, not only for myself, but for many of my clients as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I got a question about that. Interesting though, the way as you speak of it, it reminds me when I had an early awakening. For me, one of the things was breath work, right? A type of breathing therapy. And when I had a huge light bulb moment with that, my response was, I want more. I got the bug
Mhm.
in the same kind of way
Yeah.
as you. And what I learned in that process is the best way, I don't know if it's the best way, one of the best ways to learn something to get the results for ourselves is to
Yeah.
learn how to be a practitioner, how to be a
Mhm.
professional in that and serve other people. And it sounds like that was a similar process for you.
Mhm.
And so, question though, this is going to sound probably like the stupidest question ever, um, is what's the impact of pain in people's lives? And I say this, let me make it sound a little less stupid because I've been for so long. I was a fat kid. I was out of shape. I learned early on to take care of my body. And I got into yoga and I became a health freak. And it's been so long since I've lived with chronic pain, or, it's very rare that I have even like severe acute pain. So I forget in some way what that's like, though I think the majority of people in the world are living with physical pain. So what would you say as to, I mean, am I right in that assumption? And what is the impact for them? What are you seeing and experiencing?
Yeah, well, when I had the fibromyalgia-like symptoms, it was all consuming. Like I was running my own physiotherapy clinic, so I had to keep working. I've told myself anyway. So I pushed myself through, and that's probably why I went from like a post-viral fatigue to chronic fatigue to fibromyalgia, because I didn't listen to my body.
Mm,
I ignored the whispers of my body's wisdom, and I just kept pushing through. And it wasn't until I came to that point where I hit a wall that I and had to do something about it, that it really made me take a step back and realize how much I had been ignoring my body. And it's so strange because I was a physiotherapist, so I was working with the body for
mm,
years,
mm,
but I had been taught in a very linear scientific way,
mm,
and I had no idea about the mind body connection.
mm,
So it wasn't until I experienced myofascial release that I was able to be aware of where I was bracing and holding tension in my body.
mm,
And I was oblivious to it.
mm,
And then once you become aware of where you're bracing or holding tension in your body, then you have a choice.
mm.
So awareness brings choice, and we have a choice whether we want to keep bracing or whether we want to soften and let go. I so yeah, it was a huge journey for me.
Mm.
I moving from a very linear scientific world into a much more a mind body approach. But
Yeah.
yeah, going back to the physical pain, it was totally debilitating. I used every ounce of energy in work, and then when I came home, I had nothing left.
Mm.
So it put a strain, on family life. It was really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Well, so you said a couple things I key in on there. One, since you used the term myofascial, and I'm aware of what that is and
Mm-hmm.
grateful for it. That I realized, maybe not everybody knows
Mm-hmm.
what that is. So I'll invite you in a moment to share more about what that is and what it means, and maybe we can feed two birds with one scone here. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you the other question that relates, because you spoke about bracing, holding and bracing, right? And how you became aware of that. And then we have a choice. Do we hold and brace, or do we, I think you said, soften and let go?
Mm-hmm.
So will you say more about myofascial and also this
Mm-hmm.
hold and brace thing?
Yeah. So the fascia is a really strong connective tissue that goes throughout your entire body. When I was training as a physio, we were told it was unimportant packaging and just to ignore it. When we were doing the anatomy dissections at university, that's what we were told. But now there's like fascial symposiums and congresses around the world, like they're realizing how important it is. and it's a continuous structure that goes throughout your entire body. So it's uninterrupted. It's a layer upon layer upon layer, and it goes right down to a cellular level. So again, when I was training at university, we were told it wrapped around the muscles and that was it. But it's around your organs and through your organs, through your muscles. It's around every single cell in your body. And it brings, it can be called like the life force of your body, because it brings nutrients to every cell in your body. And when we all have habitual bracing patterns, and whenever we continually, repetitively brace in certain parts of our body, the fascia starts to solidify, and it creates a huge compressive force through your organs and your joints and your pain sensitive structures, and really sort of wreaks havoc in your body. So the myofascial release treatment that I do is a very gentle, sustained releases that help the ground substance in the fascia to change into that more liquid state from the solid state. So there's a change in the ground substance, but also the myofascial release treatment helps the patient to have an increased awareness of inside their own body, because we all spend 90% of the time in our heads ignoring our bodies. And that's why our bodies get into the state they get into. So during the treatment, you're really encouraging the patient to come out of their head and into their body, away from their thoughts and their thinking. And it's like feeling your body from the inside out. And you're just trying to be aware of where you're bracing or holding tension in your body, and be aware of the space under the therapist's hands or between their hands, so that as you increase that awareness, or interoception, it's also known as, then you become aware of where you're bracing and holding, and that then gives you the choice to let go and soften.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That was a really clear explanation and phenomenal. I mean, it's the way it always goes, right? There was a time when doctors smoked cigarettes and said that there's nothing wrong with that. Now we hear that and we're like, how could they have ever conceived of that? Like, so yeah, that's the way it goes. We learn things as we go. And the fascia is not just a meaningless capsule for us. So bracing, I get what you mean about what happens when people brace. What would you say to this, though, in terms of why do we brace? What's going on there? What does it mean to brace, in fact?
I think it's very often a response to our thoughts and our thinking. If we're having fearful or anxious or worrisome thoughts, we automatically tend to brace. Like, I know if I'm nervous about something, I tend to clench a lot in my sleep, and my right side in particular, for some reason, just really clenches, and I'll wake up with like really sore teeth because I've been clenching. And that very often goes down into the right side of my body, because the fascia is continuous. It's if it tightens in one area, it creates a drag and a pull through the rest of the system. So it's like if you imagine sticking your finger into a spider's web. If you start to move your finger, it doesn't move the web just where your finger is; it moves the whole entire web. So bracing or tension in one part of the fascial system has a knock-on effect throughout the body.
Which then implies that if there's some release in one area, it will release in other areas. Is that right?
Yes. And sometimes when you're doing myofascial release on a patient, sometimes say I might be working on their pelvis, and they will say, oh, I can feel like this pressure building up in my jaw, and they can't understand why, because your hands are on their pelvis. But and that was one of my first experiences ever. when I was doing the training with John, somebody was doing a release in my psoas area, which is in your stomach. And you just keep trying to soften your whole body as they're working in that one area. And I could feel this pressure in my jaw, especially on the right side, like just building and building. Like it felt so intense, and I could not understand why this was happening up here when they were working down in my stomach. And then I asked John, you know, why was I experiencing that? And he said, have you ever had any dental or oral surgery? And I had a tumor removed from the roof of my mouth when I was in my final year at university. And it was quite extensive. So they had to take a skin flap to replace the hole in the roof of my mouth. So I have a lot of scar tissue in there. And I explained that to him, and he said, the tissues in your mouth were remembering the trauma of the surgery. And, you know, because the fascia is all continuous, it can be releasing in one area, and it might highlight another area of restriction.
That's amazing, right?
Yeah.
You know, the body is just so, I mean, the body, mind, spirit, emotion system, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I remember in my early training with breath work, and people would have such deep releases, sometimes of trauma, also sometimes, like I remember when I was in my training, I was assisting my teacher. This is going back to 1996, and I was assisting my teacher, and there was one particular man that was doing the breathing there, and he was clearly going through a lot of stuff and releasing, and this, just getting near him, the smell of alcohol was so strong, right? And he had been sober for something like 20 years. That just doesn't even, like, blows my mind. How does that work?
Yeah. It is incredible. And, you know, there are a lot of documented cases of a tissue memory in like organ donors or recipients. You know, there's a well-known story of a child that was murdered, and their heart was donated, and the recipient that received the heart didn't obviously know any of the story, and they started having really vivid nightmares of the murder with such clarity that their sort of account of the murder was used in court to convict the murderer. So it's tissue memory. You know, I do believe that our fascia is like our consciousness. It goes throughout our entire body. Our consciousness is not just in our head.
That makes good sense. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so maybe that's a good transition, because tell me if I'm understanding correctly. I believe the book that you'll be releasing soon, that's underway now, goes deeper into the body mind connection. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. It's called Quiet Mind, Quiet Body. And it's about unlocking the mystery of the mind, finding freedom from chronic pain. So it really brings together a psychospiritual understanding of how the mind works, and also the latest pain neuroscience, because they're both saying exactly the same thing. So it's bringing those two together in a really easy way for patients to understand really the importance of the mind-body connection.
Wow. Okay. Beautiful. And what prompted you to write that, or who is it for, and what will it how will it help people?
Yeah, well, what motivated me to write it was I've worked obviously with patients in pain for 35 years. And it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago, when my husband introduced me to the 3 principles understanding, which is the psychospiritual understanding that I'm bringing into the book, the penny started to drop for me, and I could really see that a lot of my patients that were really struggling with chronic pain were really caught up in a fear loop. and that fearful thinking was perpetuating their pain. So once I started to look into the pain neuroscience, I could really see that all pain is real, but all pain is produced in the brain, not in the body part. And that blew my mind at the start, because when I had trained as a physio, we were very much taught much more sort of biomedical model. And it's the latest pain neuroscience is moving towards a much more psychosocial understanding of pain. And the book that I'm writing is hopefully proposing a slightly new model again, which is more of a biopsychospiritual understanding of pain.
Biopsychospiritual. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's really for patients people that are struggling with chronic pain, or their family members. But also I'm hoping that medical professionals will read it as well, because a lot of like general practitioners maybe don't have the full understanding of pain neuroscience, and this could really help them to help their patients rather than just offering them a medication.
Well, you're so gracious in the way you said that. I love that. I would have been more blaming, or anyway, we'll move on, because your grace is inspiring. So many questions come from what you said. One, I want to hear more about did you say biosocial spiritual?
Biopsychospiritual.
Biopsychospiritual. I want to hear more about that. Also, though, since you said something that's really important, and lest it get lost, because it's not the understanding of most general practitioners and most people in the world, that pain is not in the body part, it's in the brain, right? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. Yeah. It's produced in the brain. Yeah. So like, for example, I'll share a really good story on this one. There was a builder in London who fell off scaffolding and landed quite a distance down on his feet, and he landed directly on a 6-inch nail that went right through his boot. And he looked down and saw it coming right through his boot, and he started to scream out in pain. They obviously called an ambulance, took him to casualty, and he was crying out in pain. They had to give him pain relief, and then they thought they would x-ray his foot in the boot before they started to try to take the nail out. And the x-ray showed that the nail went right through the middle of his toes. It hadn't even pierced his skin. So he, it's his thinking was producing pain. Like, the pain he was experiencing was real. It wasn't all in his head, but it was produced in his brain by his fearful thinking that the nail had gone through his foot.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. I mean, that's another way of describing what we think of as phantom pain, right? When somebody has an amputation, and it still hurts, but it's not even there.
Yeah.
And what it reminds me of is, I may mess this story up, but it was a great story Byron Katie told, one of my favorite spiritual teachers. She tells a story about how she would respond to, I don't know if it was her children or her grandchildren, but what happens often with children is they fall, and then the parent looks at them with fear, and then the child goes, "Oh no, ah!"
Yeah.
Right? And so the thing that Katie said, if I remember it correctly, is something like this. She saw a child fall, something that we might have been worried about, us adults, and they were fine. And then after a moment, they realized, oh, I better be upset and cry. And then Katie's response was something like, "Oh, honey, did you think you had hurt yourself there for a second?" And then it just completely unwound for the child. It's like, "Yep, that's what happened." And then poof, it was gone. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say the flip side of that is you often hear of stories of people in war situations or in a road traffic accident that maybe have 2 broken arms, but yet they can manage to drag their children out of the car without feeling any pain. So works both ways.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell one other little story then and get your response to this, because this is fun stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and right, he's very popular in the world these days, in large part because he's really bringing this scientific perspective to the spiritual. Maybe that'll be the bridge that we get into that part with you in a moment too. I remember listening to a book of his years ago, probably 10 years ago, listening to a book. It's called The Placebo Effect. And he's telling all these different placebo stories, and again, how powerful the mind is and how it actually can control the body. And he told about this incredible study, I think it was done in Japan, where they used something like poison ivy. I don't know if it was poison ivy exactly. And with one group, they actually opened the skin of the forearm up and took real poison ivy and rubbed it in there. And with another group, they did the same thing, but didn't actually use any poison ivy. And with that group, they told them that it was poison, and they manifested the what do you call that? The itchy stuff or whatever it is, the reaction. And those, most of them didn't develop any reaction because they told. And so I was listening to this. I remember so clearly. I was out on a deck in the sunshine, and my daughter was listening to it also. And a few days later, and she was 9 at the time, and a few days later, she's crawling through poison oak, right? It's a very similar thing. And somebody else there said to her, "Hey, you better get out of there." And she's like, "No, I'm immune to this." And I went to say, "No, get it." And I was like, you know what? She's smarter than I am. I'll let that go. So it is phenomenal what the body and the brain can do. But what's the spiritual part? Biopsycho spiritual.
Yeah, it's really the mind. People tend to get like the brain and the mind. They think they're the same thing, but they're not. The brain is like the anatomical, physical structure, and the mind is spiritual. It's formless. So it's really bringing in that. The metaphor of the 3 universal principles, mind, consciousness, and thought, point towards the spiritual truth of what we as human beings are and the gifts that we've been given to create our experience one thought at a time from the inside out. So it's really trying to show patients that thought creates feelings, and we live in the experience of our feelings 100% of the time, or of our thoughts 100% of the time. So it's just bringing in that whole understanding of the 3 principles with the pain neuroscience, I just feel like it offers so much more hope. And you're not trying to reach outside of yourself for a quick fix.
Right. Okay, cool. I'm with you, and I love that. And you mentioned the 3 principles that, and I have a feeling some in our audience, that me being one of them, could better understand that. Could you share a little bit more with us about those principles?
Yeah, well, it's really a metaphor. So it's like you're trying to explain something that's formless. So you have to put words on it. But it's really just an understanding that we create our experience from the inside out. And the way I explain it to some of my patients is that 2 different people can be in exactly the same situation, but they have a totally different experience. Like, for example, if you're sitting in a traffic jam, someone might have road rage, and someone else might be quite content that the pace of life is slowing down for a few minutes.
Yeah.
So the only difference in that scenario is the individual's thinking. So our thoughts and our thinking create our experience in that moment.
Makes sense. I'm with you. Yeah, and it's inarguable that we do have these phenomenally different experiences in such similar circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool. I'm with you to get a deeper understanding of how we're creating our experience and the bio psycho spiritual aspects and how that relates to pain and then presumably pleasure and the joy of life as well. That's a beautiful thing that you're sharing. I'm excited
Mm-hmm.
for the book. Do you know when it will be out?
Hopefully sort of May, June time.
Oh, that's coming up really quickly. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Well, and I think maybe that is a good transition for us, Julie, because no doubt our wise audience will say, how do I get that book? Which will lead them to say, how do I learn more about Julie? How do I get in contact with her? What's the best way?
Yeah, well, my website is quietmindquietbody.co.uk.
Okay.
And my email address is julie@mfrni.com.
Okay, perfect. That's beautiful. Well, and that's a good segue then perhaps into me remembering that you very kindly offered a free gift to our audience. Is that still true?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Would you say what that is?
Yes, I am happy to offer a one-to-one body mind coaching conversation. It's probably most beneficial to someone that is maybe struggling with chronic pain.
Okay.
Or anxious thinking. Yeah.
Or what was the last part?
Anxious thinking.
Anxious thinking. Yeah, probably not many people in the world that have that. So yeah, I'm with you. Anxious thinking or experiencing pain, chronic pain, and presumably it would be somebody that has a body also,
Yes.
and would like to feel better.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that's a very kind and generous gift. I can imagine. I don't know how many people there are in the world, but a few billion people would be wise to respond to that. Would fit. So, how can for those for whom that does fit, how is best for them to activate that gift with you?
To email me, the first person to email me on julie@mfrni.com and reach out to me that way.
Okay, first person. So let's can we make an extension for maybe a second person if it's somebody that's driving, because I don't want them to try and
Yes.
send you an email while they're driving. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Well, Julie, is there anything that I haven't asked you that if I was an incredible interviewer, I would have asked you?
Well, the only other thing that comes to mind is that I never ever thought I would be an author. Because when I was in school, my English teacher used to tell me that I was dyslexic and illiterate and would amount to nothing. And I always felt that I did struggle academically, but I didn't let that define me. You know, I have grown and developed through different opportunities that I've been given. And yeah, I love writing now, and I love creating. So yeah.
Well, there's a lot of wisdom and beauty in what you just said. That that somebody, well-meaning as they may have been, I don't know, but was defining you in a disempowering way, and you chose to go against that and to create something different for yourself and create a transformation for yourself is one, beautiful just for you and inspiring for all of us, but also what an added benefit that you've become an author and are producing more works to help more and more people. So thank you.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Dan. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for, taking this time to be with us. I really appreciate that and all the work you're doing. And not just, an author means someone who has authority in some way, right? So you're someone who's an authority about pain and the body mind connection. Though I also get that there's a real heartful, passionate side to that for you that's driven by your desire to help people. So thank you for that as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. You are so welcome. And for y'all in our audience, thank you. I am so happy that you were here with us. Thank you for breathing along with us, whether it's live or by rebroadcast. I hope you do, again, take something that Julie shared with you, assuming you haven't already sent your email. And if not, then pay for a session and work with her, for goodness sake. That you take something from what Julie shared and be inspired and allow it to apply in your life. If you're in pain, find a way to get out of pain. That's not a way to live. And it's clear evidence that it's possible for you and everyone to not only live a pain-free life, a beautiful, vibrant, thriving life. So y'all, thank you so much for being with us. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.